what is different about this unleashed and empowered President Trump is he is clearly threatening our sovereignty, and we need to respond. For the first time, the U.S., rather than guaranteeing, for the first time since the Second World War, rather than guaranteeing the rules-based order, the U.S. is turning predator. And so what Canada needs to do is work closely with our democratic allies, our military allies. I've been foreign minister. I know how to do that. That's why I would start with our Nordic partners, specifically Denmark, which is also being threatened, and our European NATO allies. I would be sure that France and Britain were there, who possess nuclear weapons. And I would be working urgently with those partners to build a closer security relationship that guarantees our security in a time when the United States can be a threat.
As the world's unmade and call it all our golden age. Ooh, we are beyond control. Ooh, no vision can deliver us. We're golden calves until we're dust. Ooh, we're born upon a throne. Don't you know, ain't nobody safe from us. All you ghosts are better off where you come from. And I set out to tame the land with lion teeth and jaws of land. I'm drunk on the control. Until the fiction wastes away, until there's nothing left uncaged. And I am on my own. Don't you know, ain't nobody safe from us. All you ghosts are better off where you come from.
Hey, we are back. Hey, Mikerowaveable, how's it going?
Hey, Weathers. How's it going? Hey, everyone. Oh, it's good to be back. Oh, that was so funny. That clip you had there at the beginning, that made me laugh. Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
Well, for the past, I think since the beginning of the show, I think you and I were often saying how much Chrystia Freeland reminds me of Tweak.
Oh my gosh.
From South Park, right?
Yeah.
So, we're trying to do this thing where before we play our intro, we play something, a little lighthearted and stuff, or something kind of, reflecting times and stuff. And so I thought the Freeland thing was kind of kind of appropriate since the tariffs are coming in.
That was perfect.
It was just a little too dire, and I've seen variations of it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Where, they would end the thing with, the NWO, from the wrestling, kind of thing, because the New World Order and all that. And it was like, no, I'm going to do something, and then so I started looking at, I think I came across the best at Tweak from South Park, and it's like I was watching, all the little clips go by, it's like here he is freaking out, here he is making hats, and then this came up. And it's sort of like, oh my God, it's so perfect. He even mentions that they have nuclear missiles.
I had to keep wiping my glasses. Oh my God, it was so funny. It's so true, and she says it in her like her little school marm voice. She's like, "And we should ally ourselves with nuclear powers." And you're like, "What are you talking about, woman?" Oh my gosh.
Oh, I lost you.
Oh,
Please come back. Hang on. Oh,
oh,
there
here
you
I
are.
am. I'm back.
Wait. Okay, good. Wow.
I just lost
Getting
connection
a
there.
little. Yeah, I think StreamYards is being a little peculiar this week. But anyways, I think we're here, so that's
Good
okay.
stuff.
So let's begin the show before StreamYards decides to kick us to the sidewalk or something like that. So let's begin. I'm Weathers,
Hi everyone, I'm Mikerowaveable. Nice to be with you again.
and we're the Common Nonsense. We do this every week, hump day at 4:20. And beforehand, we basically watch all the YouTubes, all the X that we can, and we try to come up with some perspective of what's going on in the political world, especially us being Canadians and us being very concerned about like where our politics are going and where it's taking us. And I got to tell you, man, it's been nonstop from day one of this year. You and I were talking the other day about how just out of the ordinary everything's been larger than life,
Yeah,
like
it's
I
been
don't know if
so.
it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that like this constant worry is just weird and exciting at the same time, and it's
Oh, so true. Like, yeah, we're conflicted. It's like stressful and worrying, yet it's really exciting and really uncertain all at once. And yeah, like basically during the week, Weathers and I just sort of like compile everything we're watching and reading and we try to sort it out and try to come up with the show. But yeah, there's so much going on every day and every week. And then there's confusion. Even the people who follow things so closely are like,
oh
okay,
yeah.
yeah, this story is contradicted by this news story and blah blah blah. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, even like us last week
unreal.
when we did the show last week, like what we're getting another reprieve, and it turned out we did it, and so
Yeah.
the tariffs are here and all that in full force, and everyone's tariffing wars, whatever that is these days.
Exactly.
But I
And
have to admit, I mean, it's way more exciting than the previous administration, even though that was kind of bizarre to go through, you know.
oh
But
yeah,
things haven't been this exciting in a long time and all
yeah,
that. I think we were talking the other week that I mean, I was comparing it to the time of the Cold War. Yes, I've lived that long.
yeah. I know it's like everything going on all at once, and Trump's made things just rapid. Like the news cycle is so rapid, and his, the Trumpian like operational tempo is such that everything he's doing like multiple major things almost every day to the point where, and tactically, I think that's by design because he wants to keep the mainstream press in particular off balance so that they can't, they have to report on multiple things and it keeps them on their toes. And I think that's by design. Plus, he has to get things done for his base very, very quickly. They need to start seeing results. And we were talking about that earlier that I mean, this is rapid fire for multiple reasons, and he has to be seen to be getting things done, and he's getting things done very, very quickly.
I mean, to the satis. I mean, I saw a podcast the other day or a video the other day that talked about like, especially last night. It was the address to the Congress, I believe.
Yeah,
I forgot what the is it. Was it a State of the Union? Is that
I
what you
I
call it?
think they were calling a State of the Union address last night.
Yeah,
We can
the
verify
first
that, but
one in his
yeah.
second presidency. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I think I saw the approval ratings. Like, I think in general it hit like a 70 kind of approval,
Oh,
70-30
cool.
approval roughly. And then there was what was the deal? There were two things they showed: the general approval of what he was doing, and there was like a 70-30, and then the other one was like 68
Yeah.
68-32,
So
that sort of thing. I mean, which is good. I mean,
yeah.
apparently is really good in terms of an average presidency and stuff.
Yeah, his numbers are really good right now, right? So He's got to keep it
Yeah.
going. And yeah, that State of the Union address last night was a tour de force. I don't know why, but I wasn't really prepared for it to be that long. But it was like 2 hours of all sorts of stuff, right? Including like he had guests in the gallery and everything, and he hit like all those major like platform points that he needed to talk about. And the Democrats looked like their dogs died. They just
Well,
sat there.
there. I saw like you know, I didn't even realize this, but like I saw another video just earlier, and they were actually sitting in there. Most of them with these like ping pong paddles.
Yeah,
And
the little.
they had you know lies taped on one side, or they had something on the other, like Musk lies or Musk steals and stuff. And
Yeah,
it's like, oh my god, like seriously,
yeah, I
you
know.
know?
It was kind of sad.
Well, it's lefties are just like a bunch of children, you know. And I remember them like when Biden came in, and their first initial thing to say, the general initial thing to say, was the adults were back in, you
Right.
know. And it was just, you know, they're just a bunch of kids. I mean, only kids act like this,
And
you know.
it's really hilarious. Like Trump has them in a position where he can just be like, look, they're supporting taxpayers' money getting wasted. They're supporting
Yeah, he
graft.
was
And look,
really wailing on them
yeah,
last
yeah,
night,
yeah,
wasn't he?
yeah. That was
Like
pretty
he wasn't
good.
holding back and
Nope.
stuff. It's like, oh my god. Like,
And he was a man in control of his environment. It was pretty impressive.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll get to it. We'll get to it on our time. It's on our timeline, so we'll get to it eventually.
Yeah.
But I guess we should get going with our timeline. So
Excellent.
first on our timeline is this dude. Of course, we know who he is. He's our wonderful prime minister.
Yes.
And this was basically on, was it the same day as our last podcast, or maybe just the day before? Something like that.
Yeah, when he
I
went
think
to
it was the day before.
because he went
Yeah,
to
or
Kiev,
Monday
right?
or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, this is him in Kiev. Right.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it basically gone to like an emergency meeting with Ukraine because I forgot what the reason was.
Yeah,
Remember
like,
why he was there in the first
well,
place?
he went there essentially when he should have been here dealing with the most important thing, tariffs. He went he went to Kiev, and he showed more support to the Zelensky regime. I think Bill Blair is the guy right beside him or behind him.
Ah,
And yeah, during this announcement, like Trudeau, sure enough, he announced something like he was going to give Zelensky and the Ukrainians something like $5 billion of more support that was going to be drawn from frozen Russian assets. That was one of the big talking points here. He also announced that he was going to send the Ukrainians 25 more LAVs, which is one of, and light armored vehicles, one of Canada's main armored vehicles for mechanized infantry, and it's like a mechanized infantry fighting vehicle.
we don't have very many of those ourselves.
And exactly, and that's exactly like our military is really hollowed out at this point, like because one of the things is Trudeau's been giving the Ukrainians a lot of our equipment, and we can't afford those vehicle losses. He also pledged some other equipment to, like, F-16
flight simulators.
Yeah, the 4 F-16 flight simulators, 2 combat support vehicles, and some other delivery systems for fighters and stuff like that. So,
well, we'll go through it. We'll play it. I mean, there's 6 minutes here or something. Let's play it. Let's see what he says.
Bonjour, mes chers amis. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to my fellow leaders for your timely and salient remarks. And above all, thank you, Volodymyr, for hosting today's summit and for your courageous leadership as the duly elected democratic leader of this great nation.
Duly elected? Seriously? Well, I don't know how he can say that, because Zelensky is basically ixnayed all elections pretty much
That's
throughout the
right.
war ongoing. So
Yeah.
the fact that he says duly elected, it's like, yeah, just rub in like some falsehoods over there, sir.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's he hasn't had an election since I don't know, since 2022. I don't even know when the last one they had.
Since the
But
war began.
yeah.
Since the war began.
So
At
I want to
least.
say 2022. So it's been a few years now. Going on
And
3 years.
long overdue. And on top of that, I mean, during his reign, he had basically, I think he's done things like imprisoned opposition or silenced them. He's closed churches, and he's basically fought any opposing voices on his leadership,
Yeah, that's
more
right.
or less. You know,
And that's one of the things that's really glossed over by a lot of the mainstream press is that Zelensky, in his own right, has become very authoritarian, and that's something that criticism is usually leveled at Putin, and Putin is an authoritarian. There's no doubt about that.
yeah.
But
Well,
Zelensky
yeah,
has those
Mrsunshinebaby.
tendencies as well, right?
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's keep going.
Since the start of Russia's full-scale illegal war of aggression 3 years ago, you've shown remarkable personal bravery, resilience, and resolve, a defiant spirit mirrored by the unbreakable Ukrainian people. You continue to inspire me and tens of millions of my fellow citizens back home in Canada. Let us
Wow.
be
Please speak for us, Mr. Trudeau.
I know, right?
You and the Ukrainian people should never have had to endure even a single day of this unjustified, brutal war, let alone 1,096 of them, or more accurately, over 4,000 of them since Russia illegally seized Crimea back in 2014. This is not a conflict Ukraine wanted, provoked, or asked for in any way. This is a war started for one reason and one reason only: Russia's desire to erase Ukrainian history and expand their empire. Russia's actions are nothing short of a direct attack against the rules-based international order, an order established in response to the most destructive war in our collective history, a war etched in the memory of the citizens of all of our respective nations for the past 80 years. An order which, albeit imperfect, ushered in the most peaceful and prosperous era in the history of humanity. We cannot go back. We cannot return to an era where might makes right. We must do everything in our power to enable Ukraine to secure a just and lasting peace, a peace that cannot be achieved without Ukrainians at the table. That is precisely what Canada is focused on. Canada has...
All right. I think it was the fact that I know what prompted this now. It was the fact that Donald Trump was going to go approach Putin to basically discuss or to basically start the peace process. And there was like talk that they didn't want Ukrainian, like Zelensky involved in this.
Weathers, I'm getting a bit of static when you're speaking.
Is it? Okay, one sec.
No, but
better?
you're right. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's 100% better. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, and I think that's what prompted this meeting. There was like an emergency summit to discuss this and to... No, it was somehow they were left out of a table somewhere. It was either NATO or some discussions of peace talks, and all the European nations and Canada had decided that, well, they should be at the table, and so this summit was kind of called in so that they could be at a table discussing,
Yeah.
further support of the Ukrainian Russian
Yeah,
war.
because initially it was Trump and Putin alone talking about what they were going to do. Like they were having bilateral discussions about this, and I really feel like an event like this, along with Trudeau's subsequent meeting with the European leaders in London a few days later that we'll get to. It's almost like Trudeau, in a way, he's acting. He's trying to thwart Trump. He's acting as a foil to Trump because Trump is in the midst of withdrawing support from Zelensky and the Ukrainians, and I agree with that that foreign policy step that Trump's taking. And Trudeau, is constantly being the contrarian as far as Trump is concerned, and he's all in. He's been all in since the beginning with supporting Zelensky and the Ukrainian regime, and I think
Well, he's got a little bit of personal beef. I mean, it is because of Donald Trump that he basically resigned.
it is. Yep, that's right.
So he's got a little bit of a beef to pick with him. So I get it.
No, I agree. Like, this is the stuff going on right now between Trump and Trudeau. There is like a huge personal element to it, and we've talked about this in past shows, that they really hate each other. They really, and they're constantly, like, even this past week, even the last few days, they've been like, throwing mud at each other. Like Trudeau during his Tuesday press conference, he was, we're gonna get to that later as well, like calling out Donald Trump publicly, and Trump is hitting back. He was hitting back today on Truth Social, talking about Justin. Like, this is very.
Yeah, but Justin is constantly out of his element.
He is, and he's spiteful about it, and
and every chance he has to basically, stick something into Donald Trump, he does. He'll attend all the meetings that get called, or he'll call something, or he'll give $5 billion of our money. Okay, maybe it's withheld Russian assets and crap to whatever he can to just get in the way and stuff, and it's not doing us any favors, because he won't be in power for very long, I think. And anyways, let's keep going.
Been a steadfast, unshakable partner to Ukraine since the beginning, and that will never, ever change. Le Canada est fier du travail qu'on a accompli avec vous tous autour de cette table pour faire que la Russie paye le prix de cette invasion inhumaine, que ce soit avec des sanctions ou en offrant aux Ukrainiens de l'aide humanitaire, financière et militaire dont ils ont besoin pour se défendre et faire obstacle au régime russe. But I know, we all know, there is more work to do. That is why I am announcing Canada will be providing 25 more LAV-3 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. We will be delivering 2 armored combat support vehicles, which Ukrainian forces will be trained on shortly in Germany. Landing systems for F-16s were delivered just 2 months ago, and 4 F-16 flight simulators will be provided in the coming months. And that's on top of the millions of additional rounds of ammunition, components for drone cameras, and first aid kits. We're also dispersing the first installment of the $5 billion in assistance to Ukraine funded through revenues from frozen Russian assets.
How much was that? Did you get that? Was it the $5 billion?
Yeah, the first few installments, I guess they're going to do it in chunks. I guess however they're doing it. And I just thought this was like, I don't know. I just thought, like, the fact that they're using frozen Russian assets to pay the Ukrainians, it reminded me so much of some of the things that the Trudeau regime, some of the tactics they used against the Freedom Convoy supporters and stuff like that. We'll just use your appropriated money to do that. And like, and the other thing was, when he's talking about giving all this military equipment to the Ukrainians, it's not like we can spare this stuff. Like, Canada's military that we talked about is really atrophied, and we can't spare this equipment, but they're giving. Trudeau is all in as far as Ukraine is concerned, and he's been like that ever since the beginning. And he hasn't said anything here about peace or the human cost of the conflict or any of that stuff, or being on board with Trump's peace plan.
No, it's just it seems like everything he can do to basically stick it into Trump, he'll do it. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
here's Trump trying to stop the fighting, and he's giving a bunch of bullets. You know,
Yeah.
and more money to keep the war going, and it's we can speculate why he does such things and why certain people want to keep the war going,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, with your
it seems very self-serving. A
yeah,
lot of the reasons.
I think that is true, and I think there's a whole bunch of stuff probably going on that they don't want us to know about in terms of where these monies are really going, who's benefiting from the perpetuation of this conflict. Like, why did some of these people want the war to keep going? And I have a feeling that they're profiteering from it, and they're getting other benefits that we're just not privy to, and it's pretty callous, pretty self-serving.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. One of the reasons I often glean from it is that you know they're Europe basically wants to whittle at the bear that is Russia.
They
So anything that they can throw against Russia without actually having to get their hands dirty, which is kind of shitty if you ask me.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, Ukrainians, you go there, you go fight, go basically put yourself in the battlefield, get annihilated by the Russian forces and stuff, and that
Yeah.
will weaken like the Russian forces and stuff, right? But
Yeah.
like meanwhile, like they're already they don't have an army anymore. They're basically pulling like all kinds of people to the front line. Like 60-year-olds are now being abducted from the streets, and we can show videos of that later on.
Yeah, that's right.
And being put to the front line. When you get and women. I'm not being misogynist here, but when you get to the point where you're putting women on the front line,
Yeah.
you're losing.
Yeah, that is a big problem. You're right, Weathers, that the Ukrainians have had. It's becoming acute now. Their manpower shortages. There's a lot of scenes that you can find on social media where Ukrainian recruiters are essentially press ganging people into not being they're forcing them into military service. You have clips that where people in vans like pull up to a young guy and just throw him in the back of a van, and they're also forcibly conscripting women and even people with Down syndrome, which is very sad, because they've had so many losses on the battlefield, to the point where the Ukraine, which was in a precariously a precarious demographic position before the war, but the war has really exacerbated that to the point where you have 20 women for every male,
One.
because yeah, 20 to 1
Holy crap.
ratio. That's what I saw the other day. Like, um
20-1. That's
that's what,
awful.
yeah, like I was looking at some demographic stats the other day, but I mean, I can verify that later, but essentially it's a bad situation.
Well, sadly, I
And
mean, like, I keep seeing all these, like, Ukrainian hookup sites coming up online now, and it's like,
yeah,
you laugh, but then you think about it, it's like, yeah, I get it,
yeah. And
as
it's
sad
and
as that may be.
and it's really odd. Like, it's almost like the Ukraine has become like this sort of subjugated state, like, um, by interests in the West who are interested in using it for all sorts of things, for human trafficking and for graft, and for even there's like all sorts of bioweapons facilities in the Ukraine that
Well,
are run by
even,
the
yeah,
West.
even before the war, right? Like, we hear
Yeah,
things about Burisma, for example.
yeah, yeah,
Those who are in the know of Hunter Biden and stuff. The story
yeah,
was Hunter Biden was in Ukraine, I believe. Yeah, it was Ukraine,
yeah,
and he was in this an energy company of all things called Burisma, and he was in the management team of Burisma. Hunter Biden, who has, if you look up his resume, has no business being in an energy company, has no technical skills to be in an energy company, and if you do the math, you figure out the only reason why he's there during the time he was in is because at the time his father, Joe Biden, the
Yeah.
previous president of the United States and the previous vice president of the United States with Obama, was in that position of being vice president of the United States under
Yeah.
Obama.
So there's all sorts of corruption and notorious things going on in the Ukraine, and I think part of the perpetuation of the war is it's almost like some of these people who have a vested interest in the war, they're trying to somehow cling on to their interests in the region. That's part of it.
Well, I mean, if
That's very
you're an
tragic.
outfit that builds weapons, you want a war to keep going because then you keep making weapons, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's
that's like the easiest one to come up with, really.
that too. Yeah, for sure.
You know, and of course, if a lot of people herald like Zelensky as a hero, not that I mean, I look down on comedians, but his previous occupation was actually a comedian of all things.
Yeah.
And he was just a very personable kind of guy. Had some charisma, and
And
I mean, he's not winning this war.
no, no.
As much as the people want to tell you that there's hope and we just got to keep fighting and all that. If you
Yeah.
start looking up like how, and we'll bring up some videos later on to kind of like attest to this, they're not winning this war. And
There was evidence in the opening stages of the war that the Ukrainians were doing well. I think it was 2022, because they were using like NLAWs and javelins to knock out Russian tanks and so on, and using drones and stuff like that. But that initial defensive success has really, that's not the situation right now. Yeah, the Russians are winning. They've used like their great God of War artillery to great effect. Like the war as it stands now is more grinding, more attritional than it was at the outset. And like Weathers and I were talking about this before we went to air, and Putin has essentially got what he wants. Like he has captured Ukrainian territory that essentially links the Eastern Oblast to Crimea. And I think
right.
those are some of the fundamental objectives he was looking to get.
The primary one, the way I see it.
Ones. Yeah. And he's done that. And he's also thwarted NATO expansion. That's something that a lot of times it gets lost or doesn't get talked about, that one of the reasons that Putin invaded in 2022 was because of NATO's aggressive expansion since the 1990s, where you have like this encroachment into Russian territory by NATO, and that doesn't really get talked a lot. And Trudeau was not going to talk about that here because he probably ignores it or doesn't even know about it.
Well, Ukraine is that part of Ukraine is very key. The I forgot what the Donbass is, something they call it, and Crimea, because that's basically where their oil operations stem from. This is how they bring their oil to the rest of the world. That's the passage that they take to basically the Mediterranean. From the Mediterranean, they can go anywhere on their side of the planet. And basically deliver their oil, which they exchange for money and funds Russia.
Yeah.
So it was very key to them. So as NATO, and you'll see later on when we go on through some more of our videos that we're going to present today, it was the last straw for them. Essentially, because basically if they had lost, if Ukraine had basically entered NATO, they would be cut off from, which I think really is what Europe is going for. They basically wanted to cut Russia at the legs and stuff by taking over Ukraine and basically essentially getting them landlocked and all that. So you're poking the bear.
Yeah, like that. There's no doubt, like that. Like NATO expansion eastwards and into Ukraine is seen as an existential threat to the Russians. I mean, that's That's something that they won't tolerate. Like, as much as, I'm not being an apologist for Putin here. I know Putin's an authoritarian. He's someone who would like to
Yeah.
see one of his heroes, I think, is Peter the Great, and he would like to see an expansion of the Russian sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. But at the same time, and he likes the idea of having sort of neutral or weaker buffer states on his borders with Europe. But like NATO expansion eastwards was aggressive, and it was meant to poke the bear, and Europe, NATO, and the Biden regime were using Ukraine as a proxy to fight Russia indirectly, and that's what we're
Yeah,
into now.
I mean, none of these countries who keep, pledging like all this support have really put any of their men on the ground, like in
No,
Ukraine, to fight the same war. They just keep shoveling the money, and Zelensky keeps putting his people in the front lines, and they just get mowed down by the Russians. Now,
yeah,
don't get me wrong, it's not like the Russians haven't suffered any casualties either. They have,
they have, yeah,
but the way they're going, I mean, population of Ukraine, population of Russia, Russia can like pretty much sit there, suffer all losses until there is no more Ukraine
yeah,
people
yeah.
to shovel into the grinding machine that
Yeah,
the war is.
they're in the driver's
You know?
seat here. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and
They're
we're not apologizing or supporting Russia in any. I think personally they're evil. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I mean, Putin himself is evil, and he's probably doing the same thing. Using his authoritative powers in Russia to press on this war.
yeah,
But the fact of the matter is, he still has an army. He still has people to shovel into the front. No problem. He's still in control.
yeah.
And
It's a terrible situation all around, right? Like I think the argument that we're making is that we would like to see a peace treaty or some sort of ceasefire agreement that stops the killing. And it's really interesting that Donald Trump is the one leader that has actually talked about the human cost of this conflict. I mean, Russia isn't in that great shape as far as its own demographics are concerned. Like they are losing soldiers, and to the point where they've employed a lot of sort of hard-nosed Chechen Muslim fighters that have been that
North Korean, I believe,
and,
right?
and North Korean fighters that have been used by Putin and thrown at the Ukrainians. And those Chechen fighters are bad dudes, and some of them have expressed the fact that they would really like to go into Ukraine and rape Ukrainian women. I mean, so there's all sorts of stuff going on both sides, and I think at this point, I'm not for Trudeau's position. I'm more in line with Donald Trump's position to get a peace agreement done, because it's been disastrous.
Well, I'm all for like basically not starting a war you can't finish,
Hmm.
because ultimate consequences. What the minute we start sending NATO troops into Ukraine to fight against the Russians,
Yeah,
that's when the nukes start going off.
yeah, exactly. Like John Mearsheimer was talking about the prospect of having French and British peacekeepers in Ukraine, because that's one of the scenarios they've been floating over the last couple of weeks now, and that wouldn't be tolerated, right? Like
No,
having
the,
NATO peacekeepers, quote unquote, in Ukraine, it would cause an escalation that we can't afford. Like, and
no, I
yeah,
mean
Putin has
nuclear
threatened with
war, people.
yeah, and we were so close, right? Remember, like during Christmas and in the lead up to Trump's inauguration, like it was almost like they were pushing hard for some sort of like flare up, and it was
Well, people
amazing.
were talking about World War III. We were so close, and
Yeah,
then I remember you and I were watching like the video of the what they call it, the world clock.
yeah,
How close we
yeah,
are
yeah,
to the end
yeah.
of the world.
Of
And
course.
it's like, oh my god, like seriously. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's something.
we were pretty close again, and now it's just coming. Anyways, we don't have to finish the rest of this. I mean, we pretty much got the sum of like what Trudeau was there for, and he basically pledged 20 billion of these assets to Ukraine to keep the war going, and of course to stick it into Trump because of course he's being petty and all. And
Exactly.
meanwhile, we've been given this reprieve since February 3rd to basically appease Donald Trump so that we wouldn't get these tariffs. And if I were Trump, looking even what we know of what wasn't done, and like I wouldn't be satisfied.
No.
And once again, this is one of his trips, and before he was in France, and then now he's in Ukraine, and then he was in London last week. I mean, like, look, dude, you're in your last month of your prime ministership. You've resigned apparently, but not really, and he's gone around basically, throwing money here and there, and it's sort of like, and it's frustrating because, like, despite all this, I keep hearing about how people around me want to support the liberals.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more of the same crap, really. I don't know why they would think it would be otherwise. They like I said, the left spending your money.
Exactly. Yeah, like Trudeau, this is his sort of farewell tour / doing everything to avoid talking to Donald Trump when it really matters tour. Like, he's been all over the place doing all sorts of stuff except for dealing with Trump. And when he does deal with Trump directly, like on the phone or something, he always comes out the loser, like on the short end of it,
we really should have had that animation we saw last week.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Justin, I drew a map. I drew a map. You got to see it. Maybe we'll start with that.
See it. I even put your house on it. I love that.
Maybe we'll bring it up. We'll queue it up before our intro next week. Anyways, let's go to the next point. We don't have to see the rest of this because I'm already sick from this. So the next point on our timeline is, of course, something in your area, the provincial re-election of Greggy.
Wow! Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Boy, what a crowd. Thank you so much, and what a night, and what a result. Thank you so much. Together we have made history. Together we have secured a strong, historic third majority mandate. A mandate to protect Ontario from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for being here, for sharing this incredible moment with me. To the thousands of volunteers right across this province who braved the cold, who knocked on over 2 million doors, tonight belongs to you. Thank you. I want to begin by thanking Carla and my daughters for your endless support.
Anyways, Douglas Ford, he's the leader of the Progressive Conservative at the provincial level in Ontario. He had called basically a snap election, I believe.
Yeah.
An early election so that he could secure more time of his leadership, probably because he was very popular in the votes. He is the Conservative leader in Ontario. He's a populist, I believe.
Yeah.
And I don't like this guy, despite all that. Yeah. I believe his brother was once mayor of Toronto. And
Rob Ford.
Yeah, and he was a bit of a cocaine addict. And wouldn't surprise me if there was some relation. But anyways, it's not my province. For you Americans, not my state. But please enlighten me on Mr. Ford. What can you say about him?
Oh gosh, like you're right. He is a populist. He's Rob Ford's brother. And this election was called a snap election, and I think what they did tactically was they used the situation with the Americans to
Oh yes, right.
like that was
Forgot
the
about
main that was basically the campaign Doug Ford ran was very much in opposition to Donald Trump, which is something that everyone's doing these days, and Doug Ford was not an exception in this. So he was basically he called a snap election and he ran on the platform that he would protect Ontarians from Donald Trump's tariffs. So, and he was successful in doing so. He won like the third majority government. So it went very well for him last Thursday on the 27th of February. So yeah, he won it.
I mean,
He
you can
won
see the
again.
numbers right there. If
Yeah,
you see the numbers on the bottom, that's the seats basically. So he won 80 of the seats, and you can see all the other parties in line. The NDP 25, Liberals at 14, the Green Party 2, and
yeah,
an Independent of 1. He won an overwhelming majority, and he basically campaigned on fear.
yeah, yeah, pretty much.
More or
I
less.
mean, I was telling Weathers before we went to air that I honestly I did not pay much attention to this provincial leadership provincial election because it was really subsumed by everything that's been going on internationally, everything going on with Trump and the tariffs at the federal level, and he called it. It happened really quickly, and it's over, and he's in the driver's seat, and he ran on the campaign of protectionism and anti-Trump sentiment and stuff like that. So here he is again. He's got another 4-year mandate. I guess he's slightly right of center populist. People have been getting mad at him because during the COVID pandemic, he cozied up a little bit too much to the federal liberals, but then he had certain instances where he was calling liberals out on some of their policies, and he did that the other day.
Well, yeah. Well,
About
was it a
other stuff.
few weeks ago? He had called Justin Trudeau about being absent, and when he needed, felt he needed to be here, attending to the tariff wars or the oncoming tariff wars back then.
Exactly.
And also, I mean, he won the majority from what I understand that in previous years, the NDP, the Liberals had basically ruined Ontario under their reign.
That's true.
So.
Like if you look at the results from this election, you see in red there 14 Liberal seats. I mean, the Liberals have been doing poorly at the provincial level because they were so disastrous during their 12-year tenure with McGuinty and Wynne, and there's all these scandals, and there's all this like capital flight and the Green Energy Act and all sorts of other things, and canceled gas plants and stuff like that. And it doesn't surprise me. This result doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and if you Americans kind of recognize him, yes, he is the minister who's currently threatening America by threatening to shut off the power, apparently, that is being supplied by Ontario. You'll see that a little later on as we go over it on our timeline. Anyways, that's enough about Ford. Unfortunately, the next thing on our timeline as we go along is the famous meeting at the White House with Donald Trump, President Zelensky, and J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. I guess let's play it.
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards.
This is not something you see at the White House every day, I think.
Not playing cards.
Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not
Yeah.
speaking loudly. Your country's
Can I-
in big
can-
trouble.
can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I...
You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You
and
haven't
not
been
only-
alone.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think I've heard enough. So
Yeah.
a lot of perspectives about what happened. This was on the Friday last week.
That's right.
Zelensky had come over to the White House. Apparently, they'd worked out some deal where they were going to sign off some minerals in exchange for the already $300 billion that the country has already given the Ukraine effort. There were a lot of reasons for this. Stuff I've heard basically was to basically have foster some interest for the Americans in supporting Ukraine, because up until this point, most Americans who had voted for Donald Trump basically saw the country give their tax money over to Ukraine with no exchange, and 300 billion, I believe, in comparison to
Yeah.
the European Union, which didn't even give them money for free like the Americans did. Basically gave them a loan for half as much almost,
Yeah.
or a third of as much. And so that's basically what happened here. Apparently, Zelensky was supposed to come over and do a formal signing in front of cameras, I guess, and it just degraded into a shouting match.
Yeah. And
Thoughts?
I really like the fact that Trump called Zelensky out, because Zelensky has been walking around, has been visiting all these leaders across the Western world, and nobody said no to him. And he was expecting to come in here into the White House like he did with Biden, in a position of strength and just, putting his hands out and getting everything he asked for. And Trump just said, no, you're not getting any more money. You're not getting any more equipment. And you have to treat Americans with respect. I mean, under the Biden regime, like they sent, like, as you said, 300 billion plus all sorts of equipment, vehicles, tanks, missiles, all sorts of stuff. And I really think he was due to be browbeaten by someone, and Trump, to his great credit, stood up to him, called him out. And they also called him out for, like the failure of the military. And also, I think JD Vance said some things about, I think about the political situation in Ukraine and all sorts of other stuff. So
yeah, JD Vance, like we showed in the last episode, he seems to be on this free speech thing.
Yeah.
And and for the past, ever since the war has started, Zelensky has basically staved off any re-elections.
Yeah, that's right.
And at this point, he even mentioned it in the meeting before, in this meeting in particular, that or even before that, he had mentioned that he was not doing well amongst his people.
That's right.
His approval ratings were like at 4% at this point.
That's the number I saw too, like in rock bottom approval ratings. And yeah, like suppression of elections. Also, he has some sort of personal or political beef with Christian churches. He doesn't like Christian churches. And as we mentioned earlier, the like forced conscription of civilians, including people with mental disabilities, women, older men, all sorts of stuff. And this exchange brings light to, his failings as a leader. And I'm really glad it came. I don't agree with like the mainstream press narrative that he was abused by Trump or anything like that. I think this
No,
had to
I
happen.
definitely have heard. I've definitely had heard that from basically the rest of the world in
Me
our side of
too.
the border. All kinds of people saying, how he should have been treated like a hero. Well, I mean, to that, I mean, for the last 4 years, he had basically kept promising to, push the Russians back with the support of the Americans, and it just seems like nothing has really happened. Like there hasn't been no success, and even though the press keeps trying to say that the Ukrainians are successfully resisting the Russians,
Yeah.
that's not what I see.
Yeah.
Like
It hasn't.
No.
I remember, I can't remember exactly when this happened, but the Ukrainians engaged in like an operation in the Kursk region. They tried to like do like this counterattack into the Kursk region, and it was really like hyped up, using like tanks and armored vehicles and stuff, and it ground to a halt. It didn't do what it was expected to do. That's just one example. So no, like
there's been many more since.
The Ukrainians are on the back foot right now. They're losing ground, and the Russians are attritionally grinding forward and stuff. So yeah, it's not a good situation.
No, and if I see tons of people like, believe it or not, LinkedIn of all places. I go there to find work and stuff, and it's become basically a political argument ground, even worse than Facebook, I find. And there's constantly posts about support for Ukraine and how they should keep fighting, they should keep supporting the Ukrainians and stuff, and they just don't understand, like, without the world's support, I mean, the war would have been over, and not to the benefit of any Ukrainian at this point.
That's right.
And I hate how they keep telling people like we just need to keep pushing and eventually they're going to win. Well, let me play this next clip.
Yeah.
This next clip is Tim Pool, and he's on the Patrick Bet-David podcast. And this was a year ago on top of that. And he basically, in this next clip, he explains at that point, so a year ago, so 2023, that the Russians have already won the war, even though people keep telling you that, no, the fight is still going on and the Russians are losing. Well, let's play this clip and show you otherwise.
To me is to see young leftists on social media being like, we have to stand with Ukraine. I'm like, why? And, so I think the hypocrisy right there for me and the people I know, they're asking themselves, why did we spend all this money over there when we had a decade of water problems in our own country? But more importantly, when I pulled up the battle map a couple weeks ago of Ukraine, I was shocked because I wasn't tracking the on-the-ground stuff with Ukraine as much. I was shocked to discover that Russia won, because they've been telling us over and over and over again that we're winning. Russia's decimated. They're conscripting people. They're in panic. And there's these videos of like the Ukrainian soldier flicking the cigarette and being like, "Leva Ukraine," or whatever. And then you pulled the battle map and you're like, wait, so Russia secured the entire Donbass land bridge from the Donbass, the land bridge into Crimea, which was their stated goal. So I feel like every story coming out saying we are winning and let's go. And I'm like, Russia wanted to control access to Crimea. It's their access to the Mediterranean, through the Black Sea, through the Bosphorus, into the Mediterranean, because that's how they ship a lot of their oil and gas. And what the threat was to them was that if Ukraine joins NATO and the EU, it cuts off Crimea. Well, first of all, before all this in 2014, before Crimea was basically taken by Russia, and they had a referendum, call it whatever you want, the threat Russia's facing is, we have the Sevastopol base. We transport a lot of our energy through here. If Ukraine falls to the EU and NATO, we lose access to the Mediterranean. We can't allow that. So first thing they do, they walk out of their naval base in Sevastopol and say, we're already here, actually, quote unquote referendum, take it. With the expansion of the war, they needed to secure access into Crimea outside of just the actual bridge over water, which we saw bombed not that long ago. Now I'm looking at this map, and we have it right here. Wow, Russia's secured land access into Crimea, which was my understanding was their stated goal. They're pushing past towards Odessa now, which is insane. And when I talk to, neocon types, pro-war establishment types on the left or liberal Democrat, whatever you want to call it, they keep saying, no, Vladimir Putin wants Poland. No, Vladimir Putin. And I was like, what strategic value does Vladimir Putin have right now economically? Look, you want to make the argument that Putin's 20-year plan is to invade Poland? Fine. But right now, what we're dealing with, this makes total sense in terms of bringing oil into the Mediterranean, competing with on the oil market. And you telling me that Vladimir Putin is a comic book villain who wants to take over the world means nothing. It says nothing about his strategy, nothing about where he's placing his troops. When I look at this, I'm like, oh, right. He wants the land bridge into Crimea to secure it so that you can't kick him out. He's gotten it. That seems like a military goal. It seems like Ukraine's lost this one, and we're dumping money down the toilet.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think it was a pretty good summary of the war at the moment.
Yeah. And I was watching something similar just this past week, and they had the similar map going up, and they have the Tim Pool just displayed there, the oblasts that have been captured by the Russians to link up with Crimea, and that's essentially the situation that we're in right now, with some like smaller expansions and contractions along the front, but that's basically the situation that Ukraine and Russia finds themselves in right at this minute. And it's I think
they've won. They've won.
The Russians have achieved their objectives. I mean, maybe at one point they were pushing on Kiev or whatever they're calling it these days, and Odessa is still at an issue. I don't think the Russians have it, or do they have it? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. The Russians are in the driver's seat, and they've essentially won the war, and the Ukrainians, they can't get any of that back.
They can't even fight for it back. And
No.
once again, let's go through the what is the goal at this point of any negotiations? I mean, you think the Russians are going to basically give this essential bridge to Crimea back? I don't think so.
No.
You're going to have to fight them for it. And so what does that mean? What does support to Ukrainian mean? And like Tim Pool was saying, it's like, I feel like we're tossing our money into a toilet at this point, because what can you achieve at this point? What is the end goal? And that's, when I get into these arguments about Ukraine, the Ukrainian war, and supporting the Ukrainian war, I simply ask, well, what would be the objectives in supporting this war? What do you hope to get back? Because Russia's not going to give them back. They've won the war. And you think bringing them to a table and then discussing stuff? Well, what do you think Russia's going to give up at this point?
And that's why, I mean, people were really miffed that the Ukrainians weren't at the table when Putin and Trump were talking about this issue. But it's because the Ukrainians and Zelensky, they have no cards to play. The Europeans have no cards to play. It's really an issue between the great powers at this point, and anything that's supporting the perpetuation of the war is just prolonging the misery and prolonging the loss of life. So I think Trump's position is the right one at this point. And all the warmongers have to cut their losses and end this one.
Yeah, because there's nothing to fight for at this point. I mean, for the Russians, everything else that they gain in Ukraine is just icing on the cake for them, really. And
I mean,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, and it's not to say that Putin isn't going to push for more gains in the future. We have the odds are pretty high that he will, but in the short term and the medium term, I think the Russians would be amenable to a deal. I mean, the other day, there's something crazy, Putin pledged to send the Americans all this aluminum and stuff, and there was some sort of I think sort of as a thank you to Trump for sort of facilitating some of the, or being involved in some of the negotiations. So I don't know. I think peace is the right tack to take at this point. And I don't.
Yeah, because like, what
yeah.
does Ukraine have to offer at this point to the Russians? I mean, the only thing the best they can hope for at this point is to stop the fight, maintain or, define a certain border to redefine the new border of Ukraine, essentially, because they're not going to get any of this stuff back. They're not going to get any of those lands back that the Russians pretty much occupy now and have secured.
Yeah.
You know what? Do you think somebody who has all the cards is just going to simply give them up? And so what does that mean? Does that mean, okay, fine, you want to fight for it? You haven't been successful for the last 4 years in regaining any of those lands back. Oh, what do you want? You want more support? You want actual soldiers from NATO going in there? Well, that basically triggers off like the nukes,
Yeah.
because Putin.
And we were so close to that. I mean, like things were so precarious, like in December and January in the lead up to Trump's inauguration. Like I remember the situation was really precarious, almost like that they were trying desperately to like escalate things before Trump got in office. That's the climate that we were in before Christmas and into the first few weeks of the new year, right? And thank goodness it didn't get to that point.
No, but I mean, like the thing is, like I keep hearing how like there was like this missile strike, accidental missile strike on Poland, and essentially what came out is that the Ukrainians had basically fired those missiles and tried to blame it on the Russians.
They were trying to do sort of like a false flag operation to make it look like that the Russians fired on a NATO member, and that would essentially trigger Article 5. And Article 5 in NATO is something like you have to support other NATO member states, and everybody would get into this massive war. They were trying to purposely draw other NATO member states into a direct conflict with Russia. And thank goodness it failed, because that would have been catastrophic for both sides, I think. And we would have had another continental war.
Well, I understand the desperation, and I understand why the Ukrainians would do something along these lines. They are losing. And that's the thing, NATO is not some group you run to basically, ask for help. I mean, the countries who join NATO have to stand on their own 2 feet. They have to have their own established armies, and and that's why there's this whole Trump keeps talking about, making your 2% of GDP to invest in your own military, because that's part of the deal. You have to be an established country that can protect its own sovereignty. Because the deal is that if you can protect your own sovereignty, when one of the partners are in trouble, well, all the partners come in and they help protect the other partner.
That's right. And
you don't come in with no guns and no protection and no sovereignty and expect the rest of NATO to come help you, because that just pulls the rest of the world into this conflict that really doesn't concern them. Other than, yes, it's sad that Ukraine is losing its sovereignty. It is sad, and I have nothing against the Ukrainian people, but this is the world. And for the leaders of the NATO nations to come in and help somebody who can't defend themselves, that is not the role of NATO, essentially. They're not the world police, and people like to think they are, but they're not,
And that's why one of the reasons why Donald Trump has such contempt for NATO is because its member states have been, a lot of them, just like Canada, and Canada is as guilty as anyone, have been.
Well, even more guilty than most of them, because apparently we don't even make our 2%.
No,
way below. We're barely where we should be at the 2%.
Yeah, the last stats I saw, that Canada was sitting at 1.3 or 1.4% of our GDP. We were spending on defense, and that's well below the 2%. And Trump is not a fan of NATO. He has nothing but contempt for NATO as an organization, because he sees, and quite rightly, that the United States has bore borne a disproportionate amount of the cost of European continental defense. I mean, we talked about that in relation to Canada and the United States in a North American context, but also the Americans have spent and deployed so much as far as, like defending the European continent is concerned at a tremendous cost. And Trump says, no, this situation isn't tenable. America is not going to do it anymore. As we've heard so many times, like America is not going to foot the bill for a European continental defense anymore. Either you European member states have to start dealing with your own problems by yourselves, and he's starting to withdraw. I mean, it's going to happen gradually, but with Trump, he's moving so quickly. He can make a decision really fast to withdraw more troops than Europeans are really comfortable with, and it's going to force them to deal with their own issues, right? And I think that's something that's on tap here coming up.
No, well, initially there was a reason. Like at the end of World War II, I think that's when NATO started, basically after World War II and into the Cold War.
Yep.
Europe is ruined. And obviously the Americans had to shoulder the load, had to shoulder the burden to allow the Europe to basically reconstruct itself. And so 40 years later, not only have they reconstructed themselves, but they've, from what I understand, they barely make up the 2% they're supposed to as a NATO. The European nations barely make this requirement to be in NATO.
Yeah,
and so they've relied on America for so long and haven't invested, their own money into developing their own defense.
That's right, because they figured they didn't have to, because America was always there. America was bearing the burden. America still has tremendous presence on the European continent, especially in Germany. Germany post Second World War was seen as one of those, the pariah state that couldn't be trusted. So, Germany has essentially been occupied to varying degrees since the end of the Second World War. And essentially when the bill came to the table at the restaurant for defense, all the European member states decided to, go to the bathroom while America picked up the check. And that's one of those things that it's hard to admit, but the truth hurts. And
well, I mean, just take for France, for example, and they have all these higher education institutions, and they've invested in a lot of their social programs. You look at England; they've invested in a lot of their social programs, and they haven't actually contributed their share. And to constantly expect America across the ocean to constantly pick up the bill, they get really tired, especially when you look at things like the fact after North Carolina, we saw them a few episodes ago, right? And they're still waiting for help,
Yes.
And so the average taxpayer basically sees all this money going overseas, and it's sort of like, what the hell,
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that, because the United States is the brokest country on the planet. And we looked at the debt clock the other day, and what we were was America at 39 trillion or something crazy, and they just can't afford to spend the way they've been spending. And Trump sees NATO as a burden, and he wants to trim that expenditure, and he's going to do it. He hasn't made any major announcements yet, but
let's do it. Hang on, let me bring it up. Let me bring up this debt clock, because I think I mean, you showed it to me last week, and I found it very interesting, actually.
Oh yeah. They even have they even have a Doge little addition to it now, which is really cool.
So here's the debt clock. This is the U.S. debt clock, and I think there's a version here that actually goes into the countries by country. Where is that?
Yeah, that's
if you look the world debt clock. Is that
it? World debt clocks. Yeah, it's all by country.
All right, so let's look at the states right now. Okay, so the GDP, the gross domestic product, is basically everything they produce by the minute, or everything that's sellable by the minute.
Yeah.
And then the one in the red is basically how much they owe people, the rest of the world, everything, right?
Right.
And hypothetically, if you're in good standing, this number should be bigger than this number,
Mhm.
you know, if everyone can see that. And right now, when we look at the United States, let's take a look at the United States. There are 29 trillion going out
Mhm.
and 36 trillion in debt.
Yeah, at the national level.
They're in the red.
Yeah.
They're in the red. And this is the debt that they talk about. Basically, what they produce doesn't equal the amount of debt that they're accumulating right now, or isn't bigger than the amount of debt that they're accumulating right now, right? So let's look at China. Look at China, right? They're in the black, right? They're at 18 over here, 18 trillion, and their debt is 15 trillion.
And if you scroll down to Canada, Canada has a whopping national debt of 2.6 trillion right now. And if
Not as big as the United States, is it?
But for the size of our country, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at our population compared to their population, I can understand, the difference, because they have way more people than we do. But yeah, we're in the red.
And that really, like, our national debt ballooned terribly under the Trudeau regime. Like, Trudeau's regime was responsible for the accumulation of almost every other historical federal government since the beginning, since 1867. I saw that the other day.
Well, and then let's start looking at the rest of the European nations. For example, France, right? We have like 3.2 trillion versus their debt, which is 3.9 trillion.
Yeah.
And this is a tinier country, obviously. But the thing is that, despite not having to invest as much as in their military, I don't think they have really. I think they still have a sorry state of a military compared to the Americans. They're still in debt. It's like, what the hell, Or even like the UK. I mean, they're even worse. I mean, look at these guys. 3.6 trillion, and their debt is $4.1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are these countries in the red? And how are countries like India? Look at India. They're 3.9 and they're in debt 3.6. They're in the black. This is a country that we make fun of, and a lot of people make fun of, thinking that they're third world, but they're not in debt. It's like they're in debt, but they can pay for it. Yeah. What do you think?
I just think that we're all like, if you look at all these Western nations, we're sliding off the fiscal cliff. And that's why it's really noteworthy to talk about the fact that Trump is taking tangible steps to stop the bleeding. Like, if you go back to the USA, into the detailed, if you look up at the upper left hand corner, you see that they've added the Doge clock, and it's in that gold color.
Oh, okay, I see. Right.
And you can see that I think they're talking about that in terms of the savings that the Department of Government Efficiency has saved. Yeah, and what's significant about this is that this is the course correction that America really needed. They needed someone to come in and look at the inefficiency of government, because if we had like another 4 years of a Kamala Harris / Biden type, like, U.S. aid wouldn't have been uncovered. It would have been business as usual. The accumulation of crippling debt and the fiscal situation would have deteriorated further. But we have Trump in there. He's looking at everything. He's only been in there for 6 weeks, and he's already found, what is that, 166 billion or something like that. And
I take it it's going up because of the interest accumulated by just all this money they
yeah,
just found.
like however they're
Right.
calculating, right? The point being is that like the Western world, our nations have been in terrible fiscal shape, and like in Canada, we're in terrible fiscal shape, and we don't have like there's no political will to go in there and like deal with some of our structural fiscal problems.
No, instead we have Carney who says he's going to charge us taxes. He doesn't say where that money is going to go. He's just going to reapply these taxes. We have a tax coming in on April on top of the tariffs that we
Yeah,
already have on the incoming goods. That's being charged on us.
that's right.
You know, and I want to bring this out there too. You know, like the liberals appealing to all these people who vote for liberals, like, you know, that if they really were serious about, you know, fixing this mess we're in, then why are we having this like carbon tax?
Yeah, like it makes no sense,
You know?
right? I mean, the climate that we were in before the tariff issue was inflationary, and adding a tax on tax with like Carney's proposed carbon tax increase that Trudeau was for and all that.
It's a lot of
Like,
BS because it just doesn't make sense when he talks about it. That's
yeah,
just me.
the carbon credit thing, it just doesn't make sense. And the carbon tax doesn't make sense right now. It's inflationary and it's hurting people and businesses. They're, like Pierre Poliver is the only one that has talked about it. And I think the liberals may have stolen his idea about
Yeah,
like
but
trying to
once
give
again, whenever
tax relief to the middle class and for working Canadians, which would be beneficial to us right now. But the liberals
I
are
haven't heard the liberals even talk about where this tariffs are going to go. They say they're going to apply those tariffs in, you know, to basically counter the tariffs that are being applied on their side on our products. But okay, you're going to collect all this money, but the liberals haven't been at all clear about where this money is going to go.
and yeah, and
You know,
tariffs, and it's just like these counter tariffs are also going to hurt our own people. Like the way they work is that like a tariff imposed on imported American goods ends up being like essentially like a tax or a duty on the importer who is based in Canada. So that doesn't really help us any. Like nobody's gonna. We're certainly not going to win this tariff war, and the Americans might hurt a little bit, but it's going to devastate Canada's economy, and I think that's really clear. And everything the liberals have proposed, as you said, whether it's like are going to exacerbate the problem with the cost of living, inflation, and all the rest of it. And it's not a good situation for us, is it?
no, but I mean, like, I know you're still a little doubtful we're actually going to have an election in the next coming months, but
Yeah,
I'm
like
still being hopeful. I'm still trying to be positive here. And even then, so my only worry is still that there are so many disillusioned Canadians who still will vote for Liberal, even though this is their fault. Well, it's more our fault because we voted them in for the last 3 terms.
yeah.
But we're gonna are we gonna vote them in again? And why are we voting them in again? I mean, do the Liberals have that much control over us? It's like that we forget like they're really the reason why we're in this situation in the first place.
Yeah,
You know,
and yeah, I think like I place the blame squarely with our government, and I think, pardon me, like the liberals are doing everything in their power, it seems, to exacerbate the trade war. They're trying. It's almost like they want this to happen because it's going to give them an excuse to do some extraordinary things. Like I'm of the opinion right now that I think the Liberal Party of Canada doesn't want an election. I don't think we're going to have an early election once Carney is presumably Carney is going to be the one who wins the leadership race, and we're going to figure this out in the weekend. But I think when he gets in there, I think they're going to swear him in as PM, and I think they're going to dissolve cabinet and then reappoint a new cabinet, because I think procedurally that's what they'll have to do, because the old ministry is ended. I think he's going to appoint a new ministry become prime minister by default, and I think they're going to do everything in their power to push the next federal election back. I don't think the Liberals are ready to have it, and they're going to use the excuse of the trade war to forego the election. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's the scenario that even it was really interesting just before we went to air. We saw another sort of message from Trump on Truth Social, and Trump was saying, I talked to Trudeau, and Trudeau couldn't tell me when the next federal election in Canada was going to be. And then Trump says something like, oh, like maybe.
Oh, here, let's,
Yeah.
before we get into our next one, let's bring it up, actually, since you brought it up. Share screen. What's this?
Yeah, just one of those
This one.
things.
I got it. Here it is.
Oh, thank you, Weathers. Yeah, that's the one.
What does it say here?
Justin Trudeau
Justin,
of Canada
I got it.
called me to ask what could be done about tariffs. I told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the borders of Canada and Mexico, and nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. He said that it's gotten better, but I said, quote, that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious. Like, what's going on here? I then realized he is trying to use this issue to stay in power, and he sarcastically ends it with "Good luck, Justin." And oh my goodness,
Yeah.
like this was just posted by Trump or his staff today, and this is sort of like the situation that Weathers and I have been talking about, and this is the situation that I kind of fear, where the Liberals are goading Trump to exacerbate this trade dispute in order to use it to stay in power, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it's really Machiavellian and cynical, but I wouldn't put it past them.
No, and you have a reason. I understand the reasons and stuff. I saw him on. I don't know. I guess to end it off on this topic. I'm on the opinion that they can try to pull like an Emergencies Act thing, using this as a crisis situation.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think they're just so elitist and so short-sighted and so disconnected from the population. They don't really realize how far you can push the Canadians. Like we've had enough of this crap. We've had enough of. I can feel every time I look on YouTube and the videos that I see there's a lot of Canadians who are just fed up with the Liberals right now.
Yeah.
And I see things like Danielle Smith of Alberta. And I believe I've seen some posts where she's actually talking to Donald Trump about leaving Canada and asking her, well, what do you have to offer? And, like, I don't think they realize, like, if you push people too far, I can see basically Alberta leaving, then Saskatchewan leaving, then Quebec, who's constantly wanting to leave anyways, Canada, for the longest effing time. And I've been voting in elections to go against that. Why wouldn't I at this point? Because there's really no Canada to depend on. And here's the other thing. If Alberta leaves, Canada has no money coming in.
Yeah.
That's basically the gravy train leaving Canada right there. Our oil, their minerals, the fact that they have the facilities to actually pull the oil out of the ground, and it doesn't take much to basically build a pipeline from Alberta and pipe it all the way to the refineries in the United States, which they already do anyways.
Yeah. And
so,
I think that is a very, very real issue right now. Like I think whether we like it or not, or whether we want to admit it or not, we are in a national unity crisis that is like simmering below the surface. Well, maybe not even below the surface. It's kind of out there, right? Like that sentiment is there. And I think the Liberals are crazy enough to look at their internal polling data and see exactly what you just articulated, that Canadians are fed up with them. Like our Abacus Data, I think it's David Coletto is the CEO of Abacus Data, and he is by no means a conservative, but his polls are accurate, and I think his last numbers were 41% approval rating for the federal conservatives, and the liberals were sitting at like 29%. And if the liberals, and they have to know that is, those are more accurate numbers, and I could see them based on that they wouldn't want to have a vote. So they're going to do what they're going to do in order to push that vote out, to not have an election right away, like a lot of pundits are
to what
calling for.
means? Just like we discussed earlier, to what means? Because
Yeah,
the minute
to
they set
delay.
that off, it's a ticking time bomb. Because if results don't come in, things like Alberta leaving become more real than ever.
Yep. And I really think that's what they're going to do, even though it's insane. And even though they've done the insane thing by they've tried so much to look like they're actually they haven't even done that very well. But they've tried to look like they're trying to engage with Trump, but they haven't engaged with Trump. Trudeau's avoided him. They've egged on this anti-American sentiment. Even in Trudeau's last address, he even said, keep booing the American anthems at sporting events. It's like, holy cow, and like even at the provincial level, like Doug Ford used similar tactics in terms of like anti-American sentiment, like in a lesser smaller scale, but he still used it. And I think that's what the Trudeau Liberals are doing. They're using this this anti-American sentiment to cling to power, and it's gonna hurt us so badly. It's been so irresponsible.
And once again, to all the Canadian viewers of this podcast, if any of you know me and all that stuff, and all of you who are thinking about voting for the Liberals, it's like this whole idea of like, let's kick the can further down. And, and it's like, this is like 3 can kicks down, and you want to keep prolonging this. I don't understand that, really.
And they'd rather do that and destroy our country than give up power. It's completely irresponsible. They don't have our interests at heart. Like, they don't care about the country. They would rather. And I mean, Ian Lee from Carleton Sprott School of Business, he said it multiple times that like a trade war with the Americans is going to be devastating. We're going to, like, some of these measures that Doug Ford's talk about and other people who are keen on pushing back against the Americans with counter tariffs and stuff, that like they will have an impact on some sectors of the American economy, but like we just can't win. The American economy is so much larger than ours is, and even Tiff Macklin from the Bank of Canada, Canada's central bank, said in his really good presentation that I think we played clips from it last time. He was saying that no, like the Canadian economy won't be able to recover from a tariff war with the Americans that we're now in. And and I blame our Liberal government for making this come to pass, really.
Well, there's that, but I constantly keep bringing up, it's not only the Liberal government, it's the people who vote them in. It's the people like I'm around right now who will keep voting for the Liberals, and it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Like how can you be so short-memoried on like how horrible it's been? Like I initially voted for the Liberals in their first term, the first Justin Trudeau term, and even the second one. But I started not voting for them. Like in the last one. And even that wasn't enough to get rid of them. And I still even think that if we get an election now, it's still very iffy whether this time around the Conservatives would actually succeed, which is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we can survive another Liberal term.
I've
had arguments with people, who I know, and they tell me, well, they're going to vote for Liberal again. And it's sort of like, why are you doing it? And one of the reasons one of my friends that came up with is that, she didn't want to bring instability to already an unstable economy. And it's like, well, if you keep this attitude up, it's the same attitude that brought us in this dire predicament in the first place.
Yeah.
And you're going to keep that attitude again, and then you're just going to prolong what we should be dealing with right now. This constant pushing away or kicking the can down, like not only on the government level, but on the voter level, it's ridiculous to me. It doesn't make sense to me, you know?
Yeah, I agree, and I hope if we do get a change, which we so sorely need, I really hope that it's not too late, you know, to save Confederation, because I feel like you know, I feel like we are at a crisis point, aren't we? Like, I think we were talking about this earlier, right, off air. Like, this is probably, you know, one of the like top 3, like, or even the worst crisis we've faced since one of the world wars.
You know, according to our timeline, it's still not yet the worst. The worst is because of this clip over here, which kind of words with. Hang on. Remove. Add to stage. Oh. How come it's not coming at the stage? That's weird. Present. Oh, there we go. Video file. Everything's up.
First.
Can you see that?
No, not yet.
Studio, from studio. Present. Let me try something. Share screen. It's weird. Okay. I'll stop screen. Present. Hopefully you'll remember video. Starmer.
First,
you can't see it, can you?
No, it's not presenting. But yeah, Starmer, I can't remember where he was. That at the recent security conference?
Yeah, I'm wondering why I can't bring it up. That's weird. Let me try something else. There we go.
There it goes. Yep. That's
all right. Yay. All right. So this was on Sunday, I believe, last Sunday.
Yeah.
And so after Zelensky got kicked out of the White House, he went to his friends in Europe, and there was another emergency meeting called up where Trudeau had also attended. And this is the Prime Minister of England, what's his name? Starmer?
Keir
Starmer. Keir Starmer, right.
Yeah.
My comment to any English viewers right now is like, why do you keep voting for these people?
You know? Like, honestly, man, like I think the British populace was really pissed off with the Conservatives. I think it was Rishi Sunak who was the predecessor. Or am I getting that wrong now? Because it was like Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, or was it Liz Truss and then Rishi Sunak? Oh, I don't know.
No, it was Liz Truss and then Sunak.
And then Sunak and then Starmer. And it's like,
are they all in the same party?
No, like I think Rishi Sunak and Truss were Conservatives and Keir Starmer's Labour.
This is like the NDP.
Yeah, and
and
everyone that like the British people are in a bad situation, because no matter who they vote for, it seems like they get these sort of like these lame duck traitor types.
Basically.
Yeah.
Anyways, the thing that scares me about this, let's just play the flag.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen.
Yeah, and this is the result of basically the meeting they had with Zelensky.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd put that in.
Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace. Now we need to deliver together. Finally, we agreed that leaders will meet again very soon to keep the pace behind these actions and to keep working towards this shared plan. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace. Thank you.
Well, in any case, once again, I don't know, it just seems like more posturing, especially from this dude who's like pretty weak with his people right now. He's not really liked by his people. And it just seems to be like more kind of virtue signaling, if you ask me, because notice, like in the end, at the end of it all, they still need the support of the United States. You know, that they want to build this coalition of the willing. He says that they want to basically build a European army or something of the sort. But then he puts in there, well, we can't do it without the United States.
Yeah, and they can't, because I think the Europeans, they don't want to admit it, but they're so reliant on the Americans as far as, you know, like their strategic and tactical lift within the continent and stuff like that. They can't move their troops around without American logistics. And I feel like I didn't understand how they could, you know, like on the one hand talk about needing the Americans at the table, and yet then they held that security conference where Trudeau went and they visited in London with like a lot of the European leaders, and they all had that group picture. But there was
more photo opportunities, of course.
Yeah, and there was no American representation there, and I didn't understand like the contradiction.
This felt like let's get together, discuss about it, set some plans, and then we'll try guilt tripping the United States into basically walking in this war with them.
Yeah, and
that's what it seems like to me.
And I didn't understand that contradiction, right? Yeah, like and I think
coalition of the willing.
Yeah, and it's almost like the Europeans themselves have become bit players in the negotiations that are going to take place vis-a-vis the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Like the Europeans are like they're almost like secondary characters in this drama playing out. Like
it's almost hilarious if you ask me.
It really is.
It's like, yeah, we're gonna pretend we're like the big shots here, and we're making this big meeting. We're meeting with Zelensky. We're patting him on the back, and we're saying, "Oh, we're so sorry, and we feel so sorry, and you have our support. You're a hero," and basically like placating him and stuff. And then he does a speech where we're willing to do this. We're willing to put boots on the ground, and yeah, we kind of need the Americans to do this.
I know. I found that very odd, the whole thing, because it was like, it contrasted so markedly with like Trump and Vance's confrontation with Zelensky at the White House. It just goes to show that I feel like the Europeans have taken a back seat to the great powers that have emerged, in the 21st century here, and it's almost like they were trying to like continue on as normal, and Trudeau was even there, right? Like Trudeau is not a European leader, and he was invited to this damn conference.
Yeah, because he just basically gave him like $5 billion. I mean, why wouldn't he be invited? Of course, because it's the coalition of the willing.
Yeah,
willing to contribute, willing to push the Ukrainians once again into this proxy war.
Yeah, and it just I feel like it was a lot of LARPing going on.
Yeah.
And it was trying to, it was almost like they were saving face. It's almost like they know that that the real negotiations are going to take place between Putin and Trump, or Putin and like a Trumpian representative like Rubio or something like that.
No,
And
I mean, like,
that's the state of the continent right now.
it was basically a photo op. You know, they took this opportunity to be there to support Zelensky, but in the end, I thought they were going to put soldiers, and that kind of scared me a bit. You know, because like the minute that they start putting NATO troops in Ukrainian, it's all over. That's when the nukes start going off. That's just my opinion, but still, you know.
And you're right. You're right about that. I mean, that plan has been floated multiple times. People have been talking about a peacekeeping force in like the interim space between or on the front lines of French and British troops or something like that. But that's something that won't be acceptable to the Russian side. So, but yeah.
No, I mean the minute that they start feeling any challenge whatsoever, they just have to drop a nuke, like a low yield nuke, and what they say, glass the battlefield basically.
Yeah.
And you've eliminated all opposition at that point. And then what are you going to do? Retaliate with more nuclear missiles, destroy the world? Is that what? No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Once
like
again, it's just going to be another waste of life.
Yeah. Like that's the impression that I got too. Like the securing our future summit or whatever it was called, of all these European powers, including Zelensky and Trudeau. Like I feel like it was just an optics thing that didn't accomplish much at all.
It is, and I thought they were actually gonna I don't know. It just seemed all pointless to me in the end and stuff. I mean, here's the deal. Let me bring this up. Bring up our next clip. Hopefully, come up. Okay, so like we showed earlier, like the Tim Pool thing had basically explained that Russia won the war like a while ago, like basically last year at this point.
Yeah.
And people, like I see people. Here's the deal. Also, I was on LinkedIn the other day, and I saw this big old post, big as the page, where the guy had gone into explaining, he's been thinking about this for a long time, and really mulled about it, and then he's finally decided, and he's made the arrangements, and basically he's he quit his job. He basically his intention was basically to become a Ukrainian citizen, which you can if you want to go help them out, and then basically go over there. And I was thinking, okay, because I've been saying all along, like if you support Ukraine so much, why don't you just go there and fight? Because that's what they basically need. And here I'm thinking, okay, he's going to join the Ukrainian army, okay? And then at the end of his post, he basically says, I'm joining the Ukrainian army to be a drone operator.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how naive people are sometimes, but it surprises me. So the idea that a foreigner thinks he's gonna become a citizen, sign up to the military, and be able to name the job he wants because of the skills he has as a drone operator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what's happening in Ukraine right now. So this is a man who's walking his dog, and the guys in the van are basically conscription people.
Yeah.
They're basically gonna throw him into the van and send him basically to boot camp, and and basically toss him on the front lines.
Yeah. It's crazy.
This is the coalition of the willing right now. This is what's happening, And you were saying earlier, like the women to men ratio is 20-1, and this is why.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like that, there have been many instances, like clips have been floating around social media of Ukrainian military personnel essentially press ganging civilians.
I have more.
Yeah,
That's just one of them. Here, let's
that's
play
just
more.
one.
If people aren't convinced, let's play another one that I dug up. How about this one? Here's a what they call a roll. Nope, sorry, wrong one. Sorry, wrong one. So let's try
That's
this again.
okay. But yeah, like there's a lot of clips floating around X, like depicting this sort of stuff.
This is a B-roll.
Yeah.
So this is conscription in the Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
People basically going around town, finding any eligible Ukrainian men, tossing him into a van, and basically tossing him on the front lines.
Yeah.
Into the meat grinder. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, like I keep thinking about that guy on LinkedIn who just basically posted that he was going to be a drone operator. Do you honestly think that he's going to be a drone operator at this point?
Yeah, like I mean, they're gonna throw him where they're gonna throw him, like wherever they have a manpower shortage, right? They're gonna, and even like being a drone operator in this war is not without risk. It's very, very dangerous. I mean, I was telling Weathers earlier that I saw this documentary that this investigative reporter, he went in there and he essentially embedded with some of these drone operators on the Ukrainian side, and it was like a frontline position that they may be a little bit removed from the front lines, but they're essentially like operating
Within area.
drones like
Yeah.
in like this disused, bombed out house / bunker, and it was dangerous. They had to like move around at night. There's all sorts of counter drone strikes and artillery strikes, and they showed casualties and stuff like that. So yeah, and this is the reality of where the Ukraine is right now in terms of its manpower shortage, to the point where they're press ganging civilians who don't want to go, or elderly, too young, or even mentally disabled are getting thrown into the front lines, and it's a bad situation.
Yeah, and here's one last video on that. This one. So this is a Ukrainian woman soldier who well, let's just see what she says.
Я не думала, що коли-небудь буде цей момент, що я буду записувати такі відео, але я ненавиджу цю війну. Ненавиджу. За декілька годин ми втратили стільки побратимів. За 4 місяці я стільки не втрачала. Будьте прокляті всі, хто до цього має суть.
So anyways, like the deal is that there was actually an earlier post like weeks before where she was like, proud to be Ukrainian, part of the the UDF, is that what they call it? Ukrainian Defense Force. And she was going to go in there and she was going to fight for Ukraine, and then weeks later this is her broken.
Yeah. And yeah, and this isn't the only one. I mean, I saw one that's lost in my bookmark somewhere, but yeah, essentially the same thing. There was a young guy, he was really, really angry at Zelensky, and talking about all sorts of stuff, like he was sent there to die and all the rest of it. And yeah, like morale isn't good right now, right? And yeah,
they're not winning this war.
No.
And they've lost the war, and anyone who thinks they can go in there and bully Russia to give up their spoils, essentially, who already won the war at this point, even a year before, that's not going to happen unless you want to fight for it. And of course, if you want to fight for it, if anybody else wants to fight for it that isn't Ukrainian, the minute that NATO comes in, or any European like support force comes in with anything more than the Ukrainian resistance right now, will basically be wiped out with a nuke. Why wouldn't they be?
Yeah, or Yeah, and or failing that, just like more like, more attacks from the Russians. And I think even Putin is in a situation where he would like to see peace. I do believe that. Like, I think he's willing to come to the table, especially if Trump is representing the Ukrainian side, right?
Right.
I think
And
he's willing.
he's not,
I think he's willing. He's got what he wants, and I think
he
he's
doesn't need to
willing.
fight anymore. He wants to end the
No.
war. He wants to end the fighting and all that. Fine. But once again, Zelensky coming in there expecting that he's going to get any more than what is already lost is kind of unreal.
Yeah.
Unrealistic.
That's right.
Anyways.
And, yeah. Like Trump was saying in that infamous meeting now, that like Zelensky has no cards to play.
And that's what he means. That's basically what he means. And people don't understand that. Obviously Zelensky didn't even understand that because of the language thing.
Yeah.
I'm not playing games. It's like, no, I don't really.
He was like, we're not playing cards. And it's like, oh, man.
Anyways, so the tariffs actually, next certain timeline is basically on March 4th. So when was that? Tuesday, I guess?
Yes,
yesterday.
Yes, yesterday, yeah.
The tariffs came into effect. So that's next certain timeline. So let's bring that up.
Launched a trade war.
So this is Justin Trudeau react. Why does Melanie Jolie look like she's part of the military? I don't know.
Yeah, she's definitely got her kind of like her khakis going on. I don't know, like she looks like she's wearing her stylish uniform.
I'm gonna say it's like anything I've ever seen of her is what is she again? She's our foreign affairs minister.
Yeah, the Minister of Global Affairs or whatever they're calling it these days.
Right. Has been anyways. Just anything I've seen of her is like below expectations. Honestly,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It's like watching Karine Jean-Pierre talk as the press secretary, and I don't even think she could do that job even as well as Karine Jean-Pierre, and that's how disappointing I feel of her.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's just my commentary on her.
No, I agree. Like, and when she went down to Washington, like on a solo mission, like what was it, last month or something? People were commenting on her outfit. Then she was like, "Is she an equestrian?" Like, but then she was meeting with like sympathetic media outlets, like on the left, and also meeting with Democrats, and she didn't really accomplish anything of value when she was down there. And that's more or less what we've come to expect from the Liberals at this point.
Yeah. I mean, she's basically been ineffective. She has no ability to negotiate. She's definitely not Marco Rubio.
No.
Who would be the U.S. equivalent. But anyways, let's hear what Justin has to say.
Against Canada. Their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense. Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. At the moment, the U.S. tariffs came into effect in the early hours of this morning, and so did the Canadian response. Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods, starting with tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods immediately, and tariffs on the remaining $125 billion of American products in 21 days' time. Encore aujourd'hui, on se voit forcé d'imposer des droits de douane de 25%
to introduce 25%.
Anyways, that's pretty much it. I mean, nothing new. It's pretty much like what we saw on February 3rd, or on the eve of February 3rd when the tariffs were initially supposed to be dropped. Yeah. Nothing has changed here. I don't know, man. There's really not much I can say about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're now engaged in a trade war with the Americans. It's a war that we can't win because of the disproportionate sizes of our economy and
well, we haven't. The Liberal government in the last 3 terms has not done anything that could counter this. Essentially,
yeah,
they've
exactly.
blocked every opportunity we've had. I mean, our biggest opportunity obviously would have been to build those pipelines and those LNG plants, and they've blocked every opportunity to do that. And that's what I feel has basically brought us to this situation. I mean, we got nothing to bring to the table because of their policies.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I also think that the Trudeau Liberals have been so irresponsible as in dealing with Trump instead of engaging with them and going to the table and doing what I think a sensible leader would do, and that would be like looking at the U.S. MCA or CUSMA, whatever like North American Free Trade Agreement is called these days, and sitting down with Trump and renegotiating the parts that he has a problem with and coming to a mutually beneficial agreement. I mean, that seems to be one of the things that they've avoided because I mean, they're going to have to renegotiate this North American free trade again, and they haven't done it. And Trump is using these tariffs to push for advantage really, really hard. And Trump, in his, he is being Machiavellian to the point where he is using the chaos that he's sown in the Liberal Party, that the Liberal Party are in disarray right now, and Trump sees the weakness and he's going after us. But I think a good leader would have sat down with Trump and negotiated with them as far as free trade is concerned. But they didn't do any of this, and I think they're at the point where they want it to happen.
On top of that, they're declaring all these tariffs, and they don't really indicate where these tariffs are going to go.
Yeah.
Will they go into alleviating some of the stress on the affected industries? We didn't hear anything about that.
No.
And why are we still having this carbon tax? Apparently, it's still scheduled for this April. Right. The increase of the carbon tax, which already people are paying for. And I've seen actually very recently, I didn't understand how it affects people, but there was this farmer basically who did this video. And he was showing, in the video, he's showing the bill that he was going to pay. And basically, the hundreds of dollars he was paying into the actual fuel that he was buying was basically the same amount almost pretty much the same amount he was paying the government because of this carbon tax.
Yeah, it was like crazy. It was like over 50% tax or something crazy like that. It's
100. That would be 100%, man.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because if you're paying the same amount if in taxes that you're paying into the actual fuel, that's 100%.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm thinking of a different, because I was thinking of something similar where the guy was showing his bill circled, and it was like half of it was like carbon tax or whatever, and I was like, oh my god.
But it is the same one, because think about it, right? If half the bill that he was paying is the carbon tax, that means the tax is 100% of the actual amount of the fuel.
Oh, gotcha. Yep. Yeah, I'm with you.
It's 100% tax.
Yeah. And it's insane, right? And yeah, the Liberals have not talked about foregoing the carbon tax increase or getting rid of the carbon tax. They wanted to keep going, and Carney is one of his main talking points whenever he opens his mouth is talking about carbon taxes and also carbon pricing and stuff. And to their credit, I think that conservatives are right to attack Carney on that point, because they call him carbon tax Carney, right?
I know. Here we'll hear from Poilievre himself, the leader of the opposition, and his take on how he would actually address this. And he's been very clear.
President Trump stabbed America's best friend in the back. My message to the President is this: Canada will fight back. We will defend our people and our economy, and we will put Canada first. There's no doubt that our economy will suffer, but so will yours, President Trump. In fact, you're already paying the price, with trillions of dollars erased in stock market value over the last month of these threats. Already, Americans are paying higher gas prices, as at midnight, a new American gas tax kicked in on U.S. working-class taxpayers and motorists. Your workers will soon start losing jobs they had upgrading Canadian raw materials, which, by the way, you were getting at an incredible and ridiculous bargain. And your businesses will be selling fewer products to your closest neighbor. And that's only the beginning. While Canadians are slow to anger and quick to forgive, once provoked, we fight back. And we will fight back. Now, I'd like to speak to the millions of Canadians who are anxious today after learning that President Trump has attacked our economy, to the auto workers, the forestry workers, the steel and aluminum workers, the mining and energy workers, the truckers, the farmers, to all of you who get out of bed before the sun rises and do the labor of the nation. You are afraid right now, and I understand. I want you to know that I will fight for you. I will fight for your job. I will fight for your family. I will fight for your chance at owning and paying off a home, and I will fight for your retirement. And I will fight to put Canada first. Before these tariffs came in this morning, you must have been asking yourself, how could things get any worse? Before these tariffs, you were already suffering. You wondered how you'd pay the rent, or eventually dream of buying a home after housing costs had doubled over the last decade, rising faster than in any other G7 country. You've downgraded your diet, as food prices have risen 37% faster in Canada than in the United States over the last 5 years. You might be one of the 2 million people, a record-breaking number, lined up at food banks, a number that has more than doubled before these tariffs applied. You've likely noticed that your paycheck is not keeping up with the record inflation, as Canada's GDP has grown less and lower than any other G7 country over the last decade. You might have noticed that your company has already been moving jobs to the United States, as greedy and self-serving CEOs put their share prices ahead of your job. And $500 billion net
had
left
Brookfield
from
Asset
Canada
Management
to Trump's America under the current Liberal government. And now this. But I'm here with a message of hope. We will overcome this attack on our economy, and I have a plan to do it. First, we must retaliate, targeting American goods in the following order. A, goods that we can make ourselves. B, goods we don't need. And C, goods we can get from elsewhere. Second, counter tariffs must not be a cash cow for the government. Almost every penny of the tariffs collected should go to tax cuts, with a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war. None of the money should go to new government spending and programs. We must not allow politicians to dishonestly use this crisis to once again launch a debt-fueled, money-printing spending spree that will drive up inflation and further destroy the working class and hit the poorest people the hardest.
Just like during COVID.
Yeah. And I'm playing this specifically because this is the message I don't hear from the Liberals. Like, where are those tariffs going to go? They haven't been really clear on that.
Yeah.
You know, I've looked in all kinds of videos, and Tara's the only one who actually says if he was in power, he specifically said, just right now, that all that money that they're going to collect from these tariffs, because they're being applied on us, they're going to be cycled back into offloading the pain.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the Liberals have not, you're right, like the Liberals have not outlined a plan on how they're going to alleviate the pain felt by individual taxpayers, families, or businesses. They haven't outlined a plan as to how they're going to manage any type of relief. The only thing that I remember hearing is just we're going to counter tariff American goods and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and people have this imagine that basically that we're in tariff it, so that means that the Americans don't get much money. No, it doesn't work that way.
No.
No, we're the ones who pay it.
Yeah.
But that means they collect the money off these tariffs, but where does the money go?
Yeah.
And he's pretty clear about where it's going, but the liberals aren't.
Yeah, and like the thing with tariffs imposed on American goods, I mean, it's something that it's almost counterintuitive because like it's a duty placed on importers. Like a Canadian importer that imports American goods is going to end up passing like the pain onto the consumer. So that's why it's kind of like it's a lose-lose situation. I think I mean I'm sort of ambivalent about countering the American tariffs with tariffs of our own, but I feel like it's almost like we have to do something in order to retaliate in some way. But I mean, it's one of those things that I don't feel good about because it's a situation I think we shouldn't even be in. I'm so angry that we're even at this point where we're talking about this sort of stuff, and that people like Doug Ford are talking about cutting off electricity, and he said it multiple times. I guess was it on Monday or
yeah,
yesterday?
I think I have that clip. No, I'm not going to even play it. I mean,
Oh, it's okay.
he basically went on CNN and he basically announced that he's threatening to cut the hydropower, and it's sort of like I was
like
sitting here thinking, it's like, well, if you do that, that means that you're basically going to put the statement that you can't rely on Canadian hydropower. And when we do finally get out of this tariff war, do you think they're going to come back and buy hydropower from Ontario?
Yeah, like I don't even know the answer to that question. Like I think in the short term it would be painful for the Americans, because they rely on hydro from Canada. But
yeah, but this idea of relying, like in people like Doug Ford's mind, he has this image that he's just going to throw the switch, and then all of a sudden, like all these states who depend on the hydropower that they buy from Quebec and Ontario are just going to go in the black, and there's going to be chaos, and and then Donald Trump will be forced to basically shut the tariffs down. But it doesn't work that way.
No, it's not going to happen.
You know what's going to happen? No, what's going to happen is that it's something like how they're basically out in California. They're having like these power outages, and people have to basically go through these cycles of like there won't be power at this hour and whatever.
Yeah,
ration things and
like those rolling blackouts. Like yeah.
And the thing that people don't realize is that the Americans do have alternatives to power, and the only reason why they're buying this power is that two things. I think one, it's like okay, it's relatively cheaper to buy from this hydropower that's there, and it brings the bills down fine. Okay. The other thing that that always comes to mind is, of course, like their alternatives would be like the coal plants, the nuclear plants, and because of the previous administration, they were on this like environmental kick where they wanted to choose environmentally friendly alternatives. Well, now that Trump's in charge, and the environmental alternatives are basically off the table. We've heard it many times from them. This problem will be solved. And then once they basically switch back to whatever power they choose, and they've, filled the empties that used to be the hydropower from Ontario and Quebec, once they go on that route, they're not going to come back. And so all these opportunities, once we're out of this tariff war, hopefully, are no longer there anymore.
Yeah, like when the states decide to become completely independent in terms of power generation, like I mean that will take time. I guess my point is that
not as much time as you think.
Well, I don't think if they're like, let me put it this way. I don't think the Americans can like I don't think they can provide power in the amount that that Canada supplies to them right now. But I think what my basic take is, this is an escalation that need not happen, because we can't we can't win this tit for tat trade battle escalation that is really it's really like the tone of our elected officials, from Doug Ford to Trudeau to I don't know who else, but
we're not going to last very long.
We shouldn't be getting into this, and we're getting into it. This is a trade war we can't win, and it's stupidity, and we have to stop being stupid, and we have to weather the storm as best we can without getting annihilated. And then when someone, like, God willing, I've become religious here, will actually sit down and have meaningful negotiations with the Trump administration about USMCA. That's what has to happen. Like, we have to renegotiate what needs to be negotiated with USMCA or NAFTA or whatever they're calling it these days, instead of getting in for this absolutely fucking crazy, asinine tit for tat trade war that we can't win. And I don't know why, I don't understand why people aren't shouting that from the rooftops.
We've been asleep. I mean,
so
look at
pissed.
us. We've
This is crazy.
We've voted in the Liberal government for the last 3 terms, and once again, like my friend who just says, we'll just keep voting Liberal. That's our problem right now.
Yeah, it is.
That's my opinion.
Like, getting into this escalatory trade. We're going to cut off your power, and then we'll deny your access to the cloud, and then we'll do this, and this is that. We shouldn't even be playing that game. It's completely insane, and unfortunately, that's what I see the majority of our political class doing. Is this over here?
They're playing a game that's way in over their heads.
Yeah, they're way over their heads, and they're doing it for self-serving reasons, right? Like, I mean, the Trudeau Liberals have just wrapped themselves in this anti-Americanism, and they don't care if it costs 1 million Canadian jobs. Like, they don't see the problem in the hurt that they're going to cause to our economy. They because it doesn't affect them. Like, they're not going to be subjected to losing their job.
All we hear from Trudeau is like, I should bring it up, but he did go into, well, it's going to hurt, but we got to stick together as Canadians. And it's sort of like,
no,
wow.
No, exactly. Like, it's just like during COVID, right? Like, the notion that we're all in this together, and that was not true. Like, that was so disingenuous. I mean, the political class and the public sector, civil service, and these public sector workers, they were COVID proof, they're recession proof. They were still getting paid. Meanwhile, the productive class that Pierre Poilievre is talking about, the people who produce things, and farmers and workers and small business, got crushed. And this is a similar situation we're going into, where the trade war is going to just crush the middle class and the productive classes. And these elites that are so out of touch, they don't care that it's going to happen. And it's a damn shame, and I blame them for this. There, my rant.
And right now, to that, I mean, the only thing we really can do is do the show and try to reach out to people and get them to think twice about who they vote for, because it's been 3 terms so far, and we seem to have not learned our lesson.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we're at the end of the show.
Remember
that?
Go on. No, I was just gonna say, remember that movie with Matthew Broderick where it's like in the 80s, and Matthew Broderick dials into that sort of defense supercomputer and he starts playing
war games.
And then they start doing, like, they're playing the game of, like, this nuclear nuclear weapon exchange, and at the end the supercomputer says, that what a strange game. The only way to win is not to play at all, right? And because it was
it's a good point, good
and
analogy.
It was like mutually assured destruction. And I think what we're getting into, our political class, is being completely asinine and irresponsible with what they're doing. And I can't blame them enough for this.
No, you're right on that. Anyways, we are at the end of this show. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Finish off your rant? No.
I'm done my rant for the week.
Okay. So, anyways, before we sign off, let's just go through a few more things that we haven't brought up enough. Like at the beginning, I keep forgetting. Once again, if you our Twitter handles or our x.com handles at Hand of Infinity. At Hand of Infinity is basically the blue check mark for the common nonsense. At Microwaveable TCN is where you can talk to Microwaveable, or if you want to talk to me, just message me on at Hand of Infinity. If you want to watch us on YouTube, that's our channel, the Common Nonsense YTC. Just look at the top of the page. The first playlist basically has all our podcasts. You can pick from it individually, or you can play the whole playlist if you haven't seen any of our others. Everything will be arranged from latest to least, or latest to oldest. So I invite anybody to watch our previous shows and see how we've gotten this far in our show. And of course, if you don't want to watch us on YouTube, you can also watch us on Rumble. You'll see that we actually have a branded channel now, thanks to the viewers who follow us there, or people who've seen our videos. We've actually ranked enough to actually deserve our own channel, so our branded channel. So yay, thanks to the people who watch us on Rumble.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And if you're joining us on Facebook, thank you very much. You probably come here through either an invite I've sent you, or you've seen a post of me talking about the show. I invite you to come back and watch us every hump day at 4:20 p.m. That's when the show goes on. And we'll be back next week once again to talk about more of how we progressed in this country of ours.
Exactly.
But other than that, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Thank you, Weathers. It's been a good show, and I think I hope to live to podcast another day. I think not all is lost. I know I said that last week, but I think we'll be okay despite all the craziness in our world right now. But thank you for watching.
We'll be back
everyone.
next week.
Yeah, I think we'll be back. Yeah, we'll be back.
So once again, we're on every hump day Wednesday. If you don't know what that means, at 4:20, please join us next week. We'll be posting the next theme for our show probably by Friday. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about by then, and we'll expand on it next week at this time. But other than that, thank you for joining us. Cheers, everyone. I'm Weathers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. See you next time. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.